The moment I saw my wife hunting in the night, her eyes glowing red, I knew she was no longer mine. Turned into a creature of the night by her vampire lover, she attacked innocent people. I embarked on a mission to save her, infiltrating their secret society and facing off against powerful vampire lords. The journey led me through haunted mansions, deadly catacombs, and ancient tombs. In a final showdown, I battled the Vampire King, risking my soul to break their unholy bond. This is my story of betrayal, vengeance, and the ultimate clash with a darkness older than time. I sat down at the kitchen table, still sleepy, when she placed a plate in front of me. She leaned over and kissed me. "RG, honey, you really need to brush your teeth before you eat. Morning breath," she said with a smile that lit up the room. "Someone drained all my energy last night," I said. She stepped back, placing her hand on her thigh. Her auburn curls fell over her shoulder. "You should be used to it by now," she said. "But we could stop and watch TV or something. We've been doing this for a year." Her face showed she didn't really want to stop. I stood up quickly and hugged her. Her pout turned into a smile. I dipped her back like we were in an old musical. She closed her eyes and puckered her lips, expecting a kiss. I stopped just before kissing her. She opened one eye and looked at me, still smiling. "I shouldn't kiss you," I said. "Why not?" she asked. "Morning breath, remember?" I grinned. "Shut up and kiss me," she said. "I love your morning breath." "Let's take the day off," she said. "You're sick." "Wouldn't that be a lie?" I asked. "It's just a matter of interpretation," she smirked, using one of my phrases. "How so?" I asked. "Well," she said innocently, which was one of the things I liked most about her. She was 26, slim yet curvy, and had a certain innocence. "You really are something else," she continued. "In a way, that means you're sick." She grinned. "What am I sick with?" I asked. "You know," she hinted, "all those things you make me do in bed. Most of it's not in the Bible." "Do I force you?" I asked sarcastically. She quickly nodded. "So who yelled, 'Do it again'?" I started before she kissed me to stop me. "I need to experience things to understand them," she said. "This is research, but you're not fighting corruption and sin anymore." "Then what's my job now?" she asked. "Be my woman," I grinned. She blushed and tried to hide her smile. "We have to go to work," I said. "We have more than enough money," she said. "We have cars, a house, and food. Let's take a day off." "If we take too many days off, we won't have a job, a car, food, or a home," I said. "Okay, Jason, but we get really naughty after work," she said. "Have you forgotten what day it is?" I asked. "We need to go to church after work." Her eyes widened as she looked at the calendar. "I almost forgot," she said. "We'll have to go out after church," she said. "We won't be able to do anything tomorrow. It's a holy day," she said. "Doesn't the Bible say to be fruitful and multiply?" I asked. "But we're not being fruitful or multiplying," she said. "We're just having sex." I was shocked to hear her say that. "Honey, you've got it wrong," I said. "We may not be trying for a baby, but we're doing more than just having sex. We make love. We express our deep emotional and spiritual commitment." "Do you love me that much?" she asked, smiling. I nodded. "I loved it when you expressed your commitment last night," she grinned. She kissed me again and headed for the door. She ran her fingers over one of the swords on the wall, took the keys to her Mustang, and smiled at me. She put on her Dunkin' Donuts cap and opened the door. "And don't bend over for the guys," I ordered. "Just give them their donuts and coffee. I don't want anyone but me to look at your ass." She smiled and wiggled her ass at me. "Maybe you should come here and kiss it to remind me," she said. "You know I would never do that, right?" she asked. "You know I would never do anything to anyone else, right?" she asked. I nodded. She smiled and headed for the door. Soon I heard her tires screech as she pulled out of the driveway. This woman had used more tires in a year. I walked upstairs to the bathroom. I needed a shower before work, but I had to admit that I loved her. I loved her more than anyone I had ever known. I felt like we would always be together. I've never felt this way about anyone before. An hour later, I was sitting at my desk, waiting for my last designs to be rendered. Our company insisted on using an old version of software. On top of that, our computers were so slow that even receiving email took longer than on my iPhone 5 or my old iPad. It was funny. I would hear a beep announcing an email on my iPhone, then 2 or 3 seconds later, my iPad would beep. The iPhone was on a 4G LTE network, while the iPad was only 3G. The scariest thing was my office PC, which should have been faster, was much slower. Sometimes it took over 2 minutes for the same email to appear on the PC. At lunchtime, she called me. "Can you break out for a quickie?" she asked. "I love you, but you'll have to call one of your other men," I said. "I'm a little busy. I want to finish this so I can stay home tomorrow and not have sex with my woman. There will probably be a lot of prayer and no sex." "Okay," she said. "I'll call one of the others." She hung up and I got angry. Less than a second later, my phone rang again. "Jason, can you get out of work so we can get laid quickly?" she asked, laughing. "My regular man is unavailable." "Oh, you're trying to make me jealous, right?" I asked. Her laughter was the only answer. "Today I only work until 2, she said. "Can I come and watch you work?" "I don't know," I started. "The last time I let you watch me, you teased me and we almost got caught in the closet." "I will be very good this time," she promised. "Damn, you were really good last time," I said. "That's why we almost got caught." "See you in a couple of hours," she said. I could have sworn I heard someone kiss the phone as she hung up, as if I didn't have enough distractions. I've had a difficult year. It's not easy when the most beautiful woman you know is in love with you, but I guess someone has to do it. It could be me too. My life wasn't always like this. As if on cue, the phone on my desk rang. It was building security. "Jason, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news," said the voice on the other end. "But you have a visitor. It's her, and there's a man with her. He's older. I'll meet them in the cafeteria," I said. "Good luck," he said, hanging up. I saved my drawing in case we had a power outage or something stupid happened while I was away. I walked down the stairs and through the building to the cafeteria. "Hey, Jason, some lady is waiting for you," George Steele said. George was a quality control engineer with a cheerful personality. He talked to everyone and smiled a lot. "She's not a lady, George," I said dryly. "She's my wife." He laughed and then looked at me strangely. "But I thought that hot woman you're always with." "Exactly," I said as I walked away, leaving him confused. I like leaving people confused when they say something silly or stupid. I walked into the cafeteria and waved to a few coworkers. I walked to a table in the far corner of the room. "Hi, Jason," said the woman sitting there. I hoped the man with her was a lawyer, but it was her father. "Hi, Pete," I said, extending my hand to the older man. He shook my hand warmly. "Jason, I know you heard your wife talking to you," Pete said. "She gets hurt when you ignore her." "Pete, I heard your daughter talking to me," I said. "I no longer recognize her as my wife. She refuses to acknowledge my wishes and hides behind old rules that don't matter anymore." "That's because you and I don't have the same desires," Terry spat. "Our desires are completely opposite. You want us to get divorced. I want us to stay together." "We haven't been married for almost a year," I said. "Understand this. We're done. There's not even an us to finish. I'm happy with my life as it is now. I didn't ask for it to be like this." "I don't think I could have ever dreamed things would be like this," I said. "But I will accept it, Jason. You know, we're Catholics," Pete said. "We don't divorce. We believe that when two people make a commitment to be together forever, it is binding." "This is complete nonsense, Pete," I snapped. "The Catholic Church has some old rules. They won't give us a divorce. But if we get a civil divorce, they will allow an annulment. The annulment has already been advanced. Since our case is special, a cardinal came from Rome and approved it. All we need is a civil divorce. Usually, you need to get a civil divorce first. But as I said, our case is special." Pete looked at me and then at his daughter. Terry turned away from her father. "Is it true, dear?" he asked. "Daddy, I love him," she said, ignoring his question. "We just need to talk. We can work things out. We can still be happy." "Terry, honey, you weren't telling me the truth," Pete said. "What's going on here?" "Daddy, I just want him back," Terry moaned. Her father realized for the first time that everything was not as it seemed. "I think I've known for a long time that things are kind of weird around here," Pete said. "That bishop always asks me about Jason, and Jason isn't even Catholic. Neither he nor the priest ever asks me about you, Terry. They don't even ask why you don't attend Mass anymore. What really happened in the past year? I'll tell you later, Dad, she said. I'll tell you now, I said. She'll probably keep lying to you. Jason, don't, she said. Will you give me a divorce? I asked. Never, she said. Pete, about a year ago, a few weeks before Halloween, I was very happy. I was married to the woman I loved, and I really thought she felt the same way, I began. I really felt the same way, Terry burst out. I still feel it. You're just not giving me a chance. Like many young couples, we worked too hard. But I had nothing but love and trust for Terry. I feel like a complete idiot now because I built my whole world around her. The sun rose and set for my wife. I didn't suspect anything. We lived in a nice condo and were saving up for a house. We didn't want to have children until we owned the place we lived in. We also wanted enough space for the children to grow up. I think in a way that was the beginning. We both worked long hours and had different schedules, so we were under a lot of stress. So when Terry started going out with the girls from work a couple of times a week, I thought it was a great idea. After the first few times she did it, things really got better between us. And damn, we were only married for 3 years. I never suspected anything. One of the benefits of her girls' nights out was that we started having sex a lot more often, so that was normal for me. One Saturday, I was cleaning around the house and I accidentally knocked her purse off the table. All her things fell out, and when I started packing them back into her bag, I found birth control pills. Terry, being a good Catholic, shouldn't have been on the pill and we weren't really using anything, so I got really angry. I started watching her more. I didn't say anything because, well, like I said, I loved her so much that I thought I would die without her. I really didn't want to start something or accuse her of something without proof. Remember when I took that drug from my little brother and Terry found it in my jacket? She thought I was some kind of addict and didn't believe me when I said I was just trying to prevent my brother from becoming addicted. I was hoping that those things in Terry's bag were something like that. So for my own peace of mind, I followed her to her girls' night out. The first time I followed her, everything went smoothly. She and a few of her friends from work went to a bar and spent a lot of time drinking and acting silly. I noticed that she often looked at her watch as if she wanted to be somewhere else. After a couple of hours, she got up, hugged all her friends, and left the bar. I quickly ran through the alleys to get to my car and beat her home. Luckily, she was walking quite slowly. She parked right in front of the bar, and I parked a block away, but it wasn't a competition. I drove down the back streets and got on the highway in front of her. Her Impala is a good car, but it couldn't match my Boss 302. Even though it costs less than a Shelby GT 500, I truly believe the race-inspired Boss is the best Mustang. As soon as I got on the highway, I instantly hit 60 miles per hour and was pulling away from Terry by the second. There was an overpass about 2 miles from our house where the local police like to park a patrol car to control traffic. I slowed to 65 miles per hour until I saw no one was there. I did 140 in the last mile and a half. I could have cooked a hot dog with the heat coming from my ceramic brake pads. As I pulled into my driveway, I quickly ran into the house, took off my shirt and pants, and changed into sweatpants. I grabbed the sword from the wall and went out onto my deck. Just as I started doing my exercises, I heard the sound of Terry's car in the driveway. A few minutes later, I heard her walking through the house looking for me. Finally, she came out onto the deck. My sword was a blur as I pretended to be too focused to hear her. I just don't understand why you do this, she said, smiling. But I have to admit that I like the results. It's too cold outside for you to be shirtless, honey, she said. Let's go inside and I'll show you how much I miss you. Normally, I would have taken her inside and let her show me. But that night, I refused. I was still bothered by some things, even though I didn't catch her doing anything wrong. Something felt off. Terry had been having weird mood swings lately, from wanting to have sex with me to not wanting to touch me. And there were still things that needed explaining. I decided to leave her alone until I figured out what was going on. Things seemed normal for a week. Terry was the same as always. Her mood swings seemed to have disappeared, and she was really pestering me for sex. She definitely wasn't acting like a woman who was getting it somewhere else. But this feeling in my head wouldn't go away. For a week, I followed her. At lunchtime, Terry and a couple of her colleagues, both women, went to different places for lunch every day. They went to the most boring places. It was like following a group of teenagers. One day they went to McDonald's, then Wendy's, the next day, then Burger King, then Taco Bell, and ended the week at KFC. No wonder Terry's butt is getting bigger. If she keeps eating like this, she'll weigh 300 pounds by the time she's 30. All I achieved by following her at lunchtime was missing my own lunches for a week, but I was still convinced that something was going on. When it came time for her next girls' night out, I found myself following her again. She went to the same bar, and it was just as busy as always. Terry and her friends were acting just as silly as always. I watched Terry as the women at her table came and went, got up to dance, and came back. Terry didn't get up. A couple of women got up and went somewhere else, probably to the ladies' room. Watching the bar out of the corner of my eye, I noticed movement on the roof behind me and to the side. I turned my head and saw something or someone there. Whoever or whatever it was hiding behind a ledge on the roof. I turned back to the bar and noticed something had changed at Terry's table. I counted the women and noticed one was missing. It wasn't Terry, so I didn't worry about it. It just didn't seem important. A few minutes later, I noticed Terry's friend Crystal cross the street and enter the parking lot. I hid behind a car and watched her. Crystal was walking with a guy and they headed towards her car. I had never seen this guy before, but I knew it wasn't her husband, Ed. Ed was a huge dock worker and a giant. Ed would have torn this guy in half without even bothering Crystal. The guy got into her car, but not in the front seats. They both climbed into the back seat. I crept up to the car and looked inside. I took out my iPhone and started filming them. Thanks to the street lamp illuminating the car, I got a clear video of her cheating. I wanted to make sure they knew everything was revealed and not let them have any fun. I knocked on the window and took a few pictures of their surprised faces as they looked at me. The car door opened, and the guy got out while Crystal tried to get her breasts back into her bra and button her blouse. "What are you doing, buddy?" asked the guy with her. "I know you don't," I said. "You work in the same office as Crystal and Terry. I don't know your name, but are you married? I remember you from the company picnic." "Jason, what are you doing?" asked Crystal. "The hell am I doing, Crystal?" I blurted out. "I was just driving past the parking lot on my way home when I saw you and this idiot holding hands and walking towards your car. He doesn't look like Ed, so I thought you might be in trouble. I decided to come over and talk with you in case you needed help, but obviously Ed needs help." "Why does Ed need help?" asked Crystal, her voice barely audible. "Well, he's going to need a good divorce lawyer," I said. Her eyes became the size of saucers. "He needs proof, and he can use the video I just took and the photos. He can also use them to identify your friend here." I looked at the guy as I continued talking. "You remember her husband Ed, don't you, buddy?" I grinned. "He's almost 7 feet tall, weighs about 300 pounds, all muscle, and he's madly in love with this cheater. I don't think there will be much left of you when he finds you," I said. "He'll probably have to pick up what's left of you into a rag to get enough DNA for identification. And of course, while you're in the hospital, I'll have to tell your wife." This was the moment he tried to stab me. It was funny. I saw tears forming in the corners of his eyes. "Sorry," he said. "You're damn right you're sorry," I blurted out. "I hate cheaters, but you'll be even more pathetic when this is over. After Ed tears you to pieces, I'll tell your wife about it if she doesn't already find out another way." "Hey, I'll pay you," he said. "As much as you like. My wife shouldn't find out about this. This woman is not worth my marriage. I just come here sometimes to let off steam. I just heard that she is good at sex. This is the first time, and I swear it's the last one. I'll write you a check for $3,000. I know you think I'm trying to scam you, but I don't have a lot of cash on me. You'll cash the check and then destroy the photos. I swear the check will be valid," he said. "My iPhone 5 costs $300 with a 2-year contract. The price you offered for these photos and videos was $3,000. Breaking up the marriages of 2 cheating scumbags so 2 good people can move on? Priceless. I want something." "What?" "But you can't buy it with MasterCard." I let go of his hand and told him to give me his driver's license. He began to shake his hand to restore blood circulation. He carefully handed me his ID, and I took a photo of it with my phone. He looked at me madly. "This is so I can contact you or your wife if necessary," I said sarcastically. "But what should I do?" he asked. "Pray that Crystal will do what I ask," I chuckled. He ran back towards the bar, then remembered that he had parked in the same parking lot he had just run away from. He looked at me warily. "Can I pick up my car?" he asked in a trembling voice. "Get out of here," I told him. "Jason, you have to understand. I love Ed," Crystal moaned. "It's not about love. I want to spend the rest of my life with Ed. It's just for fun and letting off some steam. I swear I'll never do that again." "Why, Crystal?" I asked sarcastically. "Are you thinking about how much you'll hurt Ed? Or just how much he'll hurt that little bastard who just ran out of here calling you names and telling you you're worthless? That guy ran out and left you here, and he doesn't care what happens to you. Big Ed would die for you." "Do you really think that I don't know this?" she screamed. "I feel the same way about him. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. It was just supposed to be fun until I got it out of my system, that's all. I have no intention of leaving Ed for anyone or anything." "Let me guess. Is this some 50 Shades of Grey or something?" I asked. She looked at me as if she was trying to figure out what to say. "No, Jason. It has more to do with you than anything else," she spat out of the corner of her eye. I saw Terry stand up. She seemed about to leave. "Crystal, we're having lunch tomorrow. Be at that park near your work at noon, and be ready to answer all the questions I ask, and be ready to answer honestly. If you lie, your marriage will end." She just looked at me and nodded. "Don't tell anyone that I caught you. Don't tell anyone. Do you understand?" I hissed. Crystal must have known I was serious because she was waiting for me when I arrived at the park the next day. She looked nervous. She came and got into my car as soon as I pulled up. "Do you want to do it here or go to a motel?" she asked. "Do what?" I asked. "You know, have sex," she said, looking around as if looking for a camera. "Are you crazy?" I shouted. "I don't cheat. I have never cheated on Terry. I never have and never will. Why do cheaters always think that everyone else does too?" "Sorry," she moaned. "It's just that when you refused the money Nick offered you and said that our marriage depended on what I had to do, I just assumed, you think too highly of yourself," I spat. "I don't need that. All I want are answers and the truth. I'll check other sources. And if you lie to me, I'll go to Ed." As soon as I mentioned Ed, she shrank into the leather seat of my car as if he was watching her. "I'll tell you everything you want to know," she said. "You started going to girls' nights a few months ago. Was cheating the main reason you started doing it?" I asked. "No," she said. "Of course not. We started getting together after completing a really stressful job and decided we all deserved to relax and celebrate. The completion of any challenging project forms a bond among team members. We are all different. Some of us are married, some of us are divorced, and some are single. We are all of different ages. The only thing we have in common is work." "You said I had something to do with your betrayal. Explain what you meant," I said. "Jason, I didn't mean that literally," she said. "It's just that Terry loves you so much that she brags about you all the time. She talks about your muscles, swords, and training, but she also mentions how you bring her flowers just because you thought of her. She talks about how you are in bed, and many of us are very jealous of this. I wanted to find someone like you and have fun for a short time. I love Ed more than anything. But in bed, he—" "What is it?" I asked. "That's just how he is," she said. "Men are obsessed with size." "Then why do so many women leave their husbands for men who are better equipped?" I asked. "Because they're foolish. They leave their husbands after a few sessions with these big guys. They don't realize that good sex requires variety and creativity. It also needs to involve someone who cares about you. I just wanted to experience some of the things you give to Terry. Are all the women in your group cheating?" I asked. "Hell no," she said. "Most married women wouldn't even think about it. Sure, single women are free to do what they want, but most of them don't go after married guys either." She looked at me, sensing what was coming next and bracing herself. "Is Terry cheating on me?" I asked. She turned away. I knew it was hard for her, but she had a choice, and she knew where this conversation was going from the start. It was her friendship with Terry against her marriage. "Yes," she said, "but only a couple of times with a couple of guys. Well, the old man makes 3. But Jason, you have to understand. It's not what you think. At least not with the first 2 guys." "Get out of my car," I growled. I could hardly hold myself together and didn't want this cheater to see me cry. "No," she said. "You need to let me explain. Say what you want and then get out of my car." I said sharply. Jason, Terry loves you. She would die for you. But women are hard to understand. You two have what most people would consider an ideal marriage, but women want variety. I give her variety, I spat. Yes, yes, she said, in a way. But in other ways, you're just like Ed. I looked at her as if she was speaking gibberish. Jason, I've heard all the stories, she said. I know you two have used costumes, games, role-playing, and even experimented with a lot of wild and soft things too. But there are two things you don't understand. First, no matter what you two do, she always knows you love her. Sometimes she wants you to treat her roughly. My mouth opened. I don't think it's a serious problem, she said. The biggest problem is you, darling. This girl thinks you've hung up the sun, stars, and moon. She's sure one day you'll get tired of her. She sees herself getting old and thinks you'll move on to one of those young women in your office. Everything you do in bed is what you imagine. She wanted to experiment a little to bring something new to you. She wants to be mysterious and creative, to exhaust you with her passion so you won't leave her. And finally, Jason, she realized that part of what she was looking for was just stupidity. She slept with a few guys before you, but her experience has been limited. She just wanted to try another guy to see if what you two have is really as special as she thinks. After she tried 2 guys, which she said were just terrible compared to you, I think she understood and was ready to stop until she met the old man. What? I spat. You said what Terry and I have is special. You should have said what Terry and I had in the past tense. Jason, you have to be kidding, she said. This girl can't live without you. What she did was completely wrong, but it's not worth losing your marriage. Did you know that almost 50% of married people cheat at least once? In most cases, they never get caught, and their marriages continue without incident. In cases where they are caught, if the affairs were short-lived, most people with common sense forgive their partners, and it never happens again. The cheating spouse usually understands what they risk losing and never thinks about it again. You and Terry are perfect for each other. Don't throw it away. Do you really know anyone who will make you happier than her? Before you try to cram more of your Dr. Phil nonsense down my throat, have you ever heard the expression, once a cheater, always a cheater? I asked. Tell me about this old man, as you call him. Well, he's not that old, she began. He's just older than us. It's hard to describe him, but you don't have to worry. He hasn't been around for over 2 weeks. He just shows up when he shows up, and Terry goes with him. He doesn't even come to our table. He just shows up at the doorway or outside, and Terry gets up and walks towards him. You don't have to worry. I don't think they're having sex. Then what are they doing? I asked. Damn. Terry doesn't remember this, she said. When she comes back, she's always weak and sleepy and never remembers leaving. It's like he's hypnotizing her or something. We know they're not having sex because one time he came for her during her period. Plus, she's usually gone for less than 5 minutes. She's not even sure why she leaves with him, but maybe he's just moving very slowly with her. Here's my phone number, I said. I'll keep an eye on her. I need proof for the divorce. No, Jason, she sighed. You should give her a chance. Shut up, I blurted out. Do you want to see 1 marriage end or 3? She remained silent. Crystal, you did your duty to Terry as a friend. You tried to stand up for her. You tried to protect her, but now you have to take care of yourself. Be true to yourself and all that. All you have to do is call me. If he shows up, I might already be there. But if you don't call, I'll still file for divorce. The difference is that if you help me, I swear Ed won't know about what you did for me. I also won't show him the video or photos. Agreed? Yes, she said coldly. It's not like I have a choice, is it? But Jason, I have to tell you one thing. No one is perfect. Look at yourself. You have a short temper and a gentle side. You judge people. And you enjoyed hurting Nick yesterday when he tried to hit you. You also don't seem to know how to forgive people. Terry made a mistake, a big one. And the tears in the corners of your eyes that you try so hard to hide tell me that you love her too. Are you cutting off the branch you're sitting on? What the hell should I do? Maybe I'm too harsh, Crystal. But I have self-respect. If I let her get away with this, I'll never be able to face myself again. Damn it! You said it yourself. I love Terry, I always have, but not enough to let her crap on me. Like you said, we experimented with a lot of different types of sex, but disrespecting each other is not part of it. I'm not going back to that place again, she said. This girl will spend her evenings only with her husband. Hell no, I said. You have to keep going there until I get my proof. Then you can stop. If you tell Terry what's going on or do anything else to interfere with my efforts, I'll not only send Ed the video, but I'll also post it online. Is that clear? What is my name? She asked. I almost laughed when I said, Crystal. Later that day, when I returned home, Terry was all affectionate. I could barely look at her. Luckily, she sensed something was wrong and asked me about it. Jason, are you okay? She asked. No, I'm not okay, I blurted out. My words and tone were harsher than I intended, and I didn't want to reveal anything before the right time. I haven't been feeling well lately, I said, and I got some bad news today. Her face softened, and she smiled and hugged me. Everything will be fine, honey, she said. You still have me. Tell me everything. Maybe we should spend this evening in bed together. We'll just cuddle with popcorn and a good movie. Who knows what could happen? I need to train, I said, turning away from her. Jason, you shouldn't run if you're sick, she said. And of course, the other two musketeers can handle it if you don't take the sword this evening. I just left her and walked out of the room. I heard her yelling after me, If you have that much energy, maybe you should put it into sex with your wife. We haven't done that in 2 weeks, she screamed. I changed into sportswear and went for a run. One of the reasons I chose the area we lived in was the proximity to a park and a good school system. The park gave me trails to run on, and although we didn't have kids yet, the high school gave me a track to practice on. From the looks of it, we probably won't have kids to worry about now. I really doubted that my marriage would last a month. The only reason I didn't confront her that day was because I needed leverage for the divorce. It's truly strange that in the greatest country on earth, a country that prides itself on truth and justice for all, we don't know how to deal with divorce fairly. Divorce in this country is all about women and sex. If a woman cheats on her husband, even if he does not get any pleasure, he still ends up losing. He loses at least half of their assets, even if he did nothing wrong. The victim becomes even more of a victim. On the other hand, if a man cheats, he gets a double whammy. He gets sex with the secretary or whatever, and then gets beaten up by the court system. If I show up to court with a lot of he said, she said, and my gut feeling that Terry is cheating on me, I'm going to lose big. Even if I go to court with a statement from Crystal, it won't be considered conclusive evidence. I wish I had caught Terry in that car. This farce could end now. As I ran along the trails in the park, I tried to think about my next steps and how I wanted my life to go. I returned home and took the sword I usually trained with. Terry was right about one thing. It was too cold to be outside without a shirt, even after running, which usually calms me down. I was still on edge. I decided to just work on the forms. In Japanese styles, they are called kata. In Chinese styles, they are called sets. These are groups of movements that simulate real combat to hone your skills. The set I was working on was developed by my Kenjutsu sensei. He was very modern in his teaching and took techniques from everywhere. He always told me that if you steal from one source, it's plagiarism, but if you steal from many, it's research. When he developed this set for the katana, he incorporated several different Japanese fencing styles, but also included some Chinese fencing techniques, Korean sword moves, and even some thrusts from European fencing. Immersing myself in the movements, all my problems seemed to disappear. I jumped, hacked, and stabbed. I parried, dodged, and ducked. In the end, I won. Not one of the imaginary foes I killed stood up, and not one of them could lay a blade on me. In my thoughts, each of these imaginary foes looked like a faceless old man who slept with my wife and ruined my marriage. I didn't believe a word of the nonsense that Crystal was telling me. All this talk about Terry not sleeping with this old man made no sense. But it didn't matter because I forced her to help me whether she wanted to or not. Even though she was probably lying to me, I would still keep my word to Crystal. But I was sure that somehow she would get her due. Cheaters always do. When I finished my exercises, I noticed Terry standing there. "I never get tired of watching you do that," she said. "I always imagined us in the past. Me in a beautiful dress and you fighting for my honor." I could hardly restrain myself from blurting out my first thought. "Why?" I asked. She smiled, thinking she had surprised me. I almost told her I couldn't fight for cheaters who have no honor, but I held my tongue. I went to the kitchen and made myself something to eat. I thought we'd just order pizza, she said. Maybe we can talk about what's bothering you. It's just stress, I said, and maybe some kind of illness. Honey, you need to find something to blow off some steam. Maybe go out once a week or every couple of weeks with friends. My girls' nights work wonders for me. I have no doubt, I said. Maybe you're right. Some guys at work play cards every week. I'll see if I can join their game. When I said I had no doubt, she became nervous. I noticed how tense she was. I added the part about the cards to confuse her, but I got the reaction I expected. I don't know if it was guilt or genuine concern, but Terry behaved perfectly over the next few days. She constantly told me how much she loved me when she wasn't complaining about us not having sex. She also talked about us taking a vacation somewhere romantic. I didn't believe a single word she said. When the next girls' night arrived, I received a call from Crystal. "Jason, do I have to go today?" she asked. "Going to a bar and having guys hit on me isn't something a married woman should do if she wants to stay married." "She must be able to cope with temptation," I said. "What if we just have girls' nights at someone's house?" she asked. "I don't care what you do after I get my divorce," I said, "but until then, it's business as usual." "Jason, I don't think she'll ever do that again," Crystal said. "She's been getting more and more upset lately. She thinks you don't love her anymore. She's constantly torn between feeling like she's done something wrong and the thought that you've found someone you love more. Why can't you be considerate of her feelings?" "You mean how considerate you were of Ed's feelings?" I blurted out. "Or how considerate she was to me? Just do what you have to do, and maybe you won't get hurt in all of this. In fact, if some guy starts hitting on her, you should encourage her." "Why do I have to do that?" she asked. "Are you crazy? Do you really think I would encourage her to do something so you can leave her? Why would I do that?" "Because if you don't help me get rid of her, I'll help Ed get rid of you," I said calmly. "You already know the rules of the game. All you have to do is play." "You really are not a very kind person," she moaned. "It was just for fun. She loves you." "Well, she had all the fun," I said. "All I got was pain. Taking a little back won't make me feel better for long, but at least I'll know it's over, and I can start rebuilding my life." "What about her life?" she asked. "She can go and sleep with anyone," I said, "so she gets what she wants. And at least she had a choice in how this all started, so I think it's only fair that I decide how it ends." "Damn, why don't you just take a gun and blow her brains out?" she said. "I don't have a gun, but if she wants it, I'll buy one," I said. When Terry returned home that evening, she was nervous. "Terry, I know it's your girls' night out," I said. "So do you mind if I go play cards with the guys tonight?" "No, honey," she said. "I don't mind, but I'll probably be back early. Girls' nights aren't as much fun anymore. Maybe we should change them to date nights. You know, one night a week where you and I go out and do something together. We could take turns choosing what to do, and then at the end of the evening you can try to get me drunk and take advantage of me." She smiled and looked at me. I pretended I didn't understand. "You don't have to worry, really," she continued. "For the right guy, I'm easily accessible. I'm a real date with a guarantee." "Guaranteed date," I said. "You mean like guaranteed PG? Doesn't that mean parental guidance?" "No, silly," she laughed. "PG movies are boring. GX means guaranteed sex for the right guy." "Of course, who could it be?" I asked. She started laughing and then looked at me. "You, of course," she said nervously. "If you don't want to, we don't have to have date nights." I simply nodded and headed towards the door. As I went outside, I heard her muttering something under her breath, and something in her voice told me that she wasn't sure about what she said. I didn't pay attention to her words, trying to concentrate on my plan. Now all I had to do was wait until Crystal called and said that the old man had appeared. Then I knew I could gather enough evidence for a divorce. I got into the car and headed to the meeting place where the guys usually played cards. I tried to take my mind off Terry, but it was difficult. Images of her and that old man kept spinning in my head. The next day, I was on pins and needles waiting for news from Crystal. Time passed unbearably slowly. Every minute I checked my phone, waiting for her call. Soon a message came. "He is here." I instantly got up and rushed to the car, feeling the blood pounding in my temples as I pulled up to the bar. I saw Crystal standing at the door. She looked excited and nervous. "They're inside," she said. I nodded, and gathering all my will, headed inside. "Let's just see what happens," I said. Terry was about to leave and came over to kiss me goodbye. When she pursed her lips, I turned my head and her kiss fell on my cheek. She just looked at me and told me to have a good time playing my card game. As soon as she left the house, I left too. I knew where she was going and where to park, so I didn't have to follow her and risk getting caught. Plus, even if they changed the bar, I could just call Crystal and find out where they were. It got darker earlier each week in the fall. It was already dark when I parked my Mustang. I parked next to a very interesting-looking Chevy. As I walked towards my usual vantage point, I saw him clearly for the first time. The guy in the raincoat seemed to have just scaled the side of the building next to the parking lot, at an angle to the front of the bar. Who does he think he is? Batman? It seemed ironic to me. Some clown in a suit lurking on the rooftops while I sat there in my jeans, freezing, watching my marriage crumble. He did it for fun, pretending to be a superhero, while I was forced into this because of circumstances I wished had never happened. I crouched between two parked cars to watch. The cars protected me from the blowing wind and kept me warm. I looked at what was happening in the bar. Things were just beginning. The bar was still pretty empty except for Terry and her friends. 3 women were at the table, a young, very pretty one, a middle-aged woman who already looked drunk, and a fat one who seemed unsure of herself and was trying to dance. The young one was in the center and clearly knew how to move. She moved her hips in a way that would embarrass most dancers. The older, fatter woman tried to mimic her and looked simply ridiculous. I noticed that Crystal and Terry seemed to be talking. Crystal made all sorts of expressive hand gestures as she spoke. Terry looked depressed. I started to think that maybe she really did regret what was happening. But then again, maybe she was just realizing that I was mad at her for some reason. When I looked at Crystal, who was almost screaming at Terry, I got angry. If I didn't know better, I would swear that Crystal was warning Terry about what was happening. I called Crystal while I was looking at her. She picked up the phone and looked at it. "Hello?" she said. "What the hell are you doing?" I asked, watching her. She stood up and walked away from the table. "Are you telling her that I know what's going on?" I asked. "Because if you know, she's just so depressed. She thinks you stopped loving her," she begged. "It's your fault, you know. You're terrible at pretending everything is fine." I just told her the truth. I told her if she really loves you, she should fight for her marriage and not let you leave. I'm telling you the same thing. Instead of letting some guy take your woman, you should fight for her. If I had the chance, I would do it gladly. "I never had a chance to fight for her," I said. "She did everything behind my back. And what's the point of fighting for a woman who willingly gave herself to more than one man? If she's going to be with other guys, she has the right, and I have the right to divorce her. People can do what makes them happy. I just wish I was enough for her. In the meantime, I have the right to get out of a situation that makes me unhappy. And you have your choice too. If you betray me, you'll be sorry. So stick to the plan." As I turned back to watching Terry, I noticed she was sitting at the table with her head down. She clearly didn't want to be there. I remembered her telling me that girls' nights weren't fun anymore. Then I saw a guy walking in front of the bar. It was the strangest thing. Even when he walked, he seemed to be running along the sidewalk. It reminded me of the strobe effect. I saw him, and then I saw him again, 10 or 12 feet further from where he had been before. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Somehow I felt this would be a problem. He seemed older than most people heading into the bar, which made me uneasy. Almost as if on cue, the man walked into the bar, and although I had to concentrate hard to spot him among the other customers, he was easy to find. He raised his hand, and Terry stood up like a puppet, tied to him by invisible strings. She began to move towards him as he turned and headed for the door. He stopped at the exit of the bar among the people crowding the entrance. Terry walked out of the bar like a robot and stood in front of him. He took her hand and began to lead her behind the bar. I wasn't sure what else I felt for Terry at that moment, but there was something strange about it. As he led her toward the dark alley behind the bar, I started moving before I even knew it. I noticed my reactions were off. I think that's when I noticed I got headaches when I looked too closely at this guy. When I crossed the street and was heading into the alley chasing Terry and this man, I heard footsteps behind me. I ran into the alley, and luckily the moon was rising. Although all the lights there were off, I could see well enough to make out my surroundings. There were several homeless people sitting on empty boxes and garbage containers. They looked at me when I ran into the alley. "Hey!" I shouted. He turned and looked at me angrily. Terry didn't even react to my presence. I realized there was more to this than just cheating. She was either under the influence of something or hypnotized. She didn't even know who I was. Her eyes were empty. Only he mattered. "Get away from my wife!" I screamed. He growled at me like an animal. He began to look around, and the homeless people started to become more active. I guess this should have been a warning. I felt strange. Everything in my brain told me to run. My mind was saying I was already done with Terry, but something else told me to stay. No one ever took what I wanted from me. I was going to get rid of Terry because she cheated, but I wouldn't let someone take her. He turned back to Terry, and she tilted her head back. He leaned down as if he was going to kiss her neck. And then I saw his teeth. His fangs were long, and he opened his mouth wider than should have been possible. The word vampire flashed through my mind. I didn't hesitate for a second. He was wearing some cheap, streamlined sunglasses, and the rock I threw knocked them off. His clothes were dirty and out of fashion. His tousled hair was limp and lifeless. His fingers ended in claws more like an animal's than human nails. There was a foul smell coming from him, like the sick smell of death mixed with damp earth and a bit of sewage. As the cheap glasses fell from his face, shattered by the impact of the stone, his mouth opened, and he growled loudly. His eyes glowed with a disgusting red color when he looked at me. My mouth opened in shock. At the same moment, his opened in anger. We looked at each other, with mutual but different feelings of the same thought. Surprise! He was surprised I was still there. I truly believed he thought his mental tricks would make me leave and forget about Terry. When that didn't work, he expected I'd be so scared I'd run away. But I didn't. There was a fight between us. At one point, I turned to the side and saw a pair of red leather boots trimmed in white. On the other side, I saw slightly larger boots made of thick green leather. I looked up from the red boots and saw a body in a hooded cloak of shiny red leather. I couldn't see the face, but I knew it was a woman. "Get out of here quickly," I croaked. "He is a cursed demon of the night that will soon be killed," spat the woman in green. The woman in green focused on him, while the one in red seemed more concerned about me. The woman in green wounded him, but he managed to escape. Her friend in the red hood tried to help me up. I couldn't see their faces because of their hoods. A third woman appeared from the darkness, dressed from head to toe in white leather with a hooded cloak, just like the others. Before they could chase the vampire, the homeless people in the alley attacked us like zombies. "There are too many of them. We better leave," said the woman in white. I felt better, and my strength was returning. There was no way I would let a bunch of women protect me while I did nothing. The woman in red was very close to me and didn't see me as a threat. As her cloak opened, I noticed she was carrying a daisho, a traditional pair of samurai swords. I grabbed her katana. She looked at me in shock but raised her spear to defend herself from me. I protected her from the person behind her. Her cloak swirled in the darkness, and she nodded to me in gratitude. I hate using other people's swords, but in this case it was necessary for survival. The only thing we had going for us was that the people we were fighting didn't have any technology, and they were in the same state of illegal substances or hypnotic trance as Terry. "Only one left," said one of the women. I turned around and saw her point at Terry. I moved faster than ever, covering the distance to get between the woman in green and Terry. I caught the mace staff against the back of the katana blade. The woman in green clearly did not understand my intention. "Are you really greedy?" she laughed, her voice coming from under the hood. Her tone was full of fun, aggression, and maybe a little anger. Two others joined us. "Okay," she said. "You can kill her. See, sisters, this is why we don't work with men. They're all the same. They are all selfish and greedy." "I'm not going to kill her," I spat. "Then step aside and I will do it," said the woman in green. "No one is going to kill her," I said. "You say so," said the woman in green. The woman in red stood between us. "Why use weapons when words will solve the problem?" she asked. "He's a fool, sister," the woman in green said angrily. This woman is much worse than all the others combined. Most of these fools are simply hypnotized. They would wake up and not remember what happened. We killed them because they were weak and would be especially vulnerable to the vampire's will. He could contact them over long distances with just a thought and make them do anything. But this woman tasted like a demon. She will transform, and then we'll have to deal with two of them. And this vampire is very old and very vile. He actually had the courage to enter a public tavern with people around. Both must die, and for the greater good. If this fool wants to die protecting her, then so be it. The woman in red turned to me. When she did, she took off her hood and I saw her for the first time. It felt like my world had been black and white my whole life, and suddenly color appeared. Her long, unruly hair was a very light brown color with golden blonde and even red strands mixed in. I could stare at that hair for hours, but her face was much more fascinating. Her large, expressive hazel eyes made it seem like she could tell you everything she was thinking and feeling with just a look. At one moment, they seemed innocent and cheerful. The next, you might see that she had experienced so much pain and death that it was surprising she was still breathing. Her nose was a perfect little button with a very small, almost imperceptible hump on the ridge. I'd seen the same flaw in many fighters. It indicated their noses had been broken. In her case, it only added to her beauty. I think the phrase that a more literary person than myself would use is, her slight imperfection only emphasized her beauty. And then there were her lips. The term Cupid's bow must have been invented to describe them. The strangest thing was that while I was looking at her, she was looking straight at me. I don't know how long we stood there, locked in each other's gaze. Time seemed to stand still, and neither of us could look away. The woman in white finally broke our gaze. She pulled back her hood and lowered the crossbow until its end touched the ground. Her hair was almost as white as her clothes. She seemed older than the woman in red, but that could have been my perception. She was beautiful, too. Her flawless face made it hard to tell her age. She could have been in her early 30s or early 60s. She was shorter than the other two and much thinner. Besides the crossbow, she carried two weapons that were either very short swords or very long daggers. They hung on the left side of her belt under the cloak. Perhaps we should explain the danger to him and let him make his own decision. He has earned that right, she said. The woman in green also took off her hood. Her hair was a very short pixie cut. It was red, and her creamy skin and freckles hinted at her Irish heritage. She was taller and more muscular than the other two, with strong arms and legs. She also had a small belly and large breasts. This woman was an Amazon. "Listen, dumbass," she said angrily. "Or can I call you Ken? Barbie, as you know her, is gone. She's under the control of a very powerful, very ruthless bastard who now sees you as a threat. Unlike us, you don't have the training, the discipline, or the intelligence to handle it. Barbie's life is over. Her existence will be a living hell from now on. The best way to save her soul is to put her out of her misery. Look at her." She snapped her fingers several times in Terry's face. Terry didn't react. "See, Ken," said the woman in green, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "The best thing we could do is end this for her. She won't even know what happened. It will be quick and painless." "Nurse Penance," said the woman in white. "Maybe we should let someone else explain it. You're too direct." "Man," she said, looking at me, "your friend is at least susceptible to hypnosis and may already be halfway to becoming the same creature you saw. If she wants, she will kill you in your sleep. She is nothing more than an extension of his will for now. The kindest thing to do is to end her torment. If you really care about her, as Prudence believes, you won't want her to suffer. And if you are the person I think you are, you should understand that she is a danger to everyone around her. The creature that controls her has no morals or sense of honor. It exists only for blood and its own selfish needs. It wouldn't hesitate to force her to put on a bomb and enter a school. It could be hired by any unscrupulous person for this and much more. She needs to be put out of her misery." "Jason," Prudence said softly, "are you sure you know what you're getting into?" I was shocked for two reasons. The first was because she somehow knew my name. It was a little unsettling. I had never seen her before, and she knew who I was. She spoke to me as if we were friends or had some kind of connection. Of course, she was beautiful, perhaps the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. But what bothered me was that she seemed to know a lot about me while I knew nothing about her. My second problem was that she thought she could tell me what I needed to do, or things about my relationship with Terry. She came closer to me, and I realized something was wrong. I saw her eyes go wide, and I knew she felt it too. Her presence was overwhelming. She smelled of soap, fresh air, and just a hint of magic. Being around her was like being near a generator. Energy came from her in waves. She started fidgeting while she was talking to me. "Jason," she said again. "Oh my God, what's wrong with her?" asked Penance. "Forget it, Patience, Prudence. Let's just leave. If she breaks his head, it's not our problem. We tried to warn him. He is an adult. Let him choose his own fate. It's not our fault if he chooses a blood-sucking Barbie with a kung fu grip." "Penance, if you don't want to stay, then don't stay," said Prudence. "Actually, maybe you two should try to find another trace of the vampire. I'll try to explain to Jason what he's gotten himself into while we do our job." The other two looked at each other, and then at Prudence, as if she was crazy. "Are you going to go off alone with some man?" asked Penance. "She knows what she's doing," said Patience. "I am confident that her actions will prove to be very prudent in the long run." "Go with God, sister," said Patience to Prudence. "If he tries anything, call me and I'll get him or her or both." Penance spat. Then they left, leaving us alone. Except for Terry, or what was left of her. I didn't know what to do, so I gave the katana back to Prudence. She smiled, took a cloth from a hidden pocket, wiped the blade, and returned it to the scabbard on her hip. The way she carried the swords was interesting. They weren't passed through the belt like samurai swords. They hung at the hip, secured by a long belt in a style similar to how swordsmen carried their rapiers in the 17th century. "We need to get her to your house and keep her safe so we can talk," she said. "Wait. Who are you three?" I asked. "And why do you call yourselves sisters? You don't look alike. The other two have accents. They are very light, but still there." "None of you are the same, Jason. We're wasting time," she said. "But I promise I'll tell you everything you want to know. I'll even tell you things I shouldn't. You saved me there." I smiled and told her that she saved me first. "I'm parked next to your car," she said. She gently took one of Terry's hands, and I took the other as we headed back to the parking lot. Twilight had already given way to darkness. We were indeed, as she said, wasting time as we walked back past the bar with Terry between us. She looked like she'd had too much to drink, which made any explanations easier. On the other hand, it was simply impossible to explain Prudence. How do you explain a 6-foot-tall, golden-haired goddess dressed entirely in red leather? How do you explain that she carries a spear and 2 swords under an ankle-length hooded cloak? Of course, Halloween. As it turned out, we didn't need any explanation. Although we received more than a few glances, no one stopped us or asked questions. We made it to the parking lot without incident. We loaded my wife's still zombified form into my car. Then Prudence put her weapons in hers. It turned out that the strange-looking Chevy I saw earlier was her car. As the silent vault followed my Mustang back to my house, I kept thinking about that old joke. You know, the one where the kid tells his dad about the dog that followed him home and asks if he can keep it. Damn. Prudence followed me home. Does this mean I can keep her? I mentally slapped myself. I was still married to Terry and was already thinking about another woman. What kind of jerk does that make me? Probably very healthy, considering Terry cheated on me with several men and then got involved with... I still found it difficult to call this creature a vampire. I just didn't want to believe they existed. And if they have to exist, why can't they look like Kate Beckinsale? Vampires are supposed to be all sexy in shiny black armor and work boots with a pouty smile and a slight British accent. She should fall from the 10th floor of a building and walk away to gracefully walk up to me and look at me with her incredibly blue eyes, and then damn it. I almost ran a red light. Luckily, my huge 14-inch Brembo brakes stopped me before I got into the cross traffic. Terry, buckled in next to me in the passenger seat, was still staring straight ahead, not noticing anything. A few minutes later, we pulled into our driveway. Prudence got out of her car and came over to help me with Terry. When we entered the house, she politely asked if she could take off her cloak. She left the spear in the car but carried the swords with her. If I had been lulled into inaction earlier when I was locked in her eyes, then when I saw her body, I was even more stunned. Prudence was almost 6 feet tall, but she was amazingly built. She looked like someone had gone through a catalog of high-performance body parts and put together the perfect woman. She had long, slender legs with thick, tapering calves. Her hips flared over those legs, and her backside looked like it was made to be admired. Her waist was so small that I was sure I could wrap both my arms around her. Her breasts weren't huge, but they weren't small either. She was perfect. I was sure she wasn't wearing a bra under all that leather. I know it's rude to stare, but she seemed to enjoy the attention. She insisted on inspecting the house to make sure there were no unwanted visitors. I heard her walking from room to room, looking around the house, and then suddenly, I stopped hearing her movements. I sat Terry down on the couch and went to see if Prudence was okay. I found her in my training room. Her eyes glowed as she looked at the swords displayed on floor-to-ceiling racks along one wall. "I knew it wasn't just luck," she said when she noticed my presence. "Your movements were too refined for you not to have had some training with weapons. This is unusual these days. Someday you'll have to tell me why a guy like you has so many swords. Some of these specimens are simply beautiful. There are very few antiques here, and your swords are all dead." "I didn't know swords could be alive," I said. She followed me back into the living room where Terry was sitting, where I had left her. "Jason, I'm not your enemy," she said. "Actually, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I'm amazed by you. I envy your choices and what you do. I thought it sounded funny since I'm just a regular guy who likes swords." "What about you and your sisters?" I asked. "You never explained that to me." "It's very simple, Jason," she said. "We are from a special order within the church. We are called the Sisters of Destiny. It's our job to deal with threats like this." "You mean all this stuff is real?" I asked loudly. My voice was so shrill and loud that even Terry turned to look at me. Prudence simply nodded her head. She looked at me with real concern on her face. "Are vampires real?" I asked. "What about werewolves? What about—" "Yes, there are werewolves," she said. "Do they get hairy and transform? Where does the hair come from? Where does it go when they change back?" I asked. "As far as we can tell, it's all the result of fantastic surges of hormones," she said. "When they change back, it's not exactly like in the movies. All the hair just falls out of the wrong places." "What else did you see?" I asked. "Well, not all of our cases are in the US, she said. "That's why most of us are from different places. Patience, of course, is Russian and Penance is Irish." "Wait," I said, it suddenly dawning on me. "You said you were from the church, the Catholic Church. Are you supposed to be some kind of nun? You can't be a nun." "Why not?" she asked. "Because you can't be," I said nervously. "You're too what?" she asked. "Too young. There are many nuns who are younger than me. We have those who just graduated from school." "Too beautiful," I said angrily. "What do you mean beautiful?" she asked. She rubbed her forehead and then mine. When we touched, we both trembled. "I don't feel hotter than you," she said, smiling. "Beautiful means attractive," I blurted out. "Oh, so nuns are supposed to be ugly?" she asked, smiling. "Obviously that's not true," I said, "because if it was, you wouldn't be accepted." "So you're saying I have no chance of passing the ugliness test?" she asked, still smiling. I felt awkward, so I changed the subject. "What other cases have you encountered?" I asked. I noticed that the sparkle in her eyes became brighter, and she finally removed her hand from my forehead. "Well, in this area you have some of the strangest cases. By this area, I mean the US Midwest," she said. "We ran into a high school track coach who was happily married to an actual witch. There is a Native American who has shamanic powers and seems to have a connection to the spirit of the Great Lakes. She was too strong for us to handle. There's even a car similar to yours." "Is there an evil Mustang there?" I asked. "I wouldn't call her evil," she said. "She's just overprotective. It looks like the spirit of the owner's first girlfriend is haunting the car." "Did you kill the witch?" I asked. "You know, like in the Bible, do not let a witch live." "No," she said, smiling. "She turned out to be one of the nicest people I've ever met. If we had even looked askance at that woman, the whole city would have attacked us like a plague." "What about the shaman?" I asked. "We couldn't even talk to him," she said. "He sat down on the shore of the lake. I think it was Lake Superior. Every time we approached, the winds increased to the strength of a hurricane. The winds literally blew away our cars. It was too dangerous, not only for us, but also for the people in the surrounding areas. He also did not harm anyone or do anything bad, so we decided to follow the Beatles instead of the Bible. Live and let live. At this point, we were interrupted by Terry moaning. "She's coming around," Prudence said. "We should use the next few minutes to get the answers you've been looking for." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Jason, I've been watching you from the rooftops for the last few weeks. I heard your conversation with that terrible Crystal. Now your wife is still dazed, but she is regaining consciousness. If you ask her what you really want to know, she will tell you the truth. Being out of control is almost like a truth serum. She doesn't have enough awareness to lie. At least this way you'll get the closure and answers you need. What you do with this information is up to you." "Terry," I said. She moaned again and looked at me. "Why did you cheat on me?" I asked. "I didn't," she muttered. "Cheating is wrong. I was just experimenting a little. I wanted to know how it would be." "How many experiments have you done?" I asked. "Only 4, she said. "Stupid men. None of them were good. I'm lucky to have a husband like you. None of them know how to be with me the way he does. They are all worthless. I love Jason." Terry smiled stupidly and then looked at me, her smile widening. "See what I was talking about?" Prudence asked. "At least now you know." She looked at me strangely while Terry's head wobbled limply. Terry looked like a broken doll, her head rising occasionally as she began to look around. I think what surprised Prudence was not Terry, but me. "Why are you crying?" she asked. Prudence actually looked upset that I was crying, but she didn't understand why. That told me there was something wrong with her. Most people in our situation would understand that I loved Terry for a long time. When you have been involved with another person for a long time and give your heart to them, the betrayal of that trust is very painful. I looked at the golden goddess pretending to be a nun. There was not the slightest guile in her smile. She really didn't understand what I was going through. "Have you ever been in love, Sister Prudence?" I asked. "Of course," she said. "I'm in love right now. I love God and I love the church." "Sorry," I said, "but it's not the same. It's just a different type of love. When you give someone your heart and complete trust and then find out that they betrayed you by doing something that symbolizes your love and commitment to each other with someone else, it really hurts a lot." "Do you want me to kill her then?" she asked. I shook my head. "She really is already dead. The vampire will eventually call her again, and he will either suck all the blood out of her or turn her. And in any case, she will either become undead or simply die." "So there is no way to save her?" I asked. "There is no spiritual or magical method to save her?" "Why do you care?" Prudence asked. "And what did she do to betray you? She didn't say she loved someone else. In fact, she said she loves you. What did she do?" "She slept with other men," I said. "Oh, that's it," said Prudence. "Yes, that's it," I said. "What does this really mean?" she asked. "Would you be upset if she ate with another guy? Sex is just another bodily function. Don't make too much of it." "Nurse Prudence," I said desperately, "did you have boyfriends before you became a nun? You're beautiful. You probably had a lot of them." "I've always been a nun," she said. "Members of our order are raised in a monastery." "So you—" I began. "What am I?" she asked. "You never, you know," I asked, making a gesture with my hands. "No," she said. "I've never done that." "So you've never had sex?" "Oh my God, no," she said in surprise. "Why would I do that?" "Prudence, it is really nice, and it kind of bonds you with another person. It's a way to connect with the soul of someone you truly love deeply," I said. "Oh," she said. "So it's like a prayer. Are you praying to this harlot?" "No," I said. "It's not like prayer. I'm not even sure I can explain love to you because I'm not sure I feel it now." "Okay then," she said, smiling. "Since you don't love her anymore, let's kill her and be done with it." "Damn, you're bloodthirsty for a nun," I sighed. "Even if I don't love her anymore, I still don't want her to die. It just means I don't want to be in a relationship with her anymore. I don't want to live with her anymore, but I don't want to send her screaming into the afterlife." "How do you know you're in love?" she asked. "Prue, shouldn't we be talking about some way to possibly save Terry?" I asked. "If we have to," she sighed. "If we destroy the bloodsucker, all his half-bloods and slaves will be freed. Half-breeds and slaves will be free. but any full vampires he created will lose all their powers or die. So Terry will be okay? I asked. She nodded and continued to look at me. Jason, do you realize how difficult this will be? She asked. You've already seen what this creature is capable of. He is faster and stronger than 5 men. If you damage him, he will heal immediately. He has the cunning of most large predators. He is ruthless and indomitable, and he... But what about you? I asked. Don't you do this professionally? Aren't you like Ghostbusters? Her face remained calm but did not express any opinion. The truth is, I've never seen an old vampire killed, she said. Newbies can sometimes get killed. Half-breeds too, and the slaves are easily defeated. But with older, more experienced vampires, the best we can do is get them to move. They move to the area, someone convinces their priest, the priest calls the bishop, who calls the cardinal, who calls the Vatican. We are sent away, we do research and search the area. In most cases, this never results in a collision with them. All they have to do is feel like we're in the area, and they pack up and move. The sight of us is enough to let the smart ones know that it's time to leave. But this guy was different, she said. It looked like he wanted to see what would happen. It's like he wants to test us. When patients hit him with a crossbow arrow soaked in holy water, he ran away. If she could hit him in the heart, it would kill him. It would act like a stake. This let him know we were serious, so he probably already left the area. If we can't find him, we can't kill him. And if we can't kill him, there's no way to save your wife. Save me from what? Terry asked. She held her head and looked at me, then at Prudence. Terry was 5'2", and Prudence towered over her at 5'11" with about 3 feet of golden hair, so she thought she was still coming to her senses. Honey, what's going on? She asked. Who is this woman? I didn't say a word. I ignored her. She stood up and came towards me. Jason, are you mad at me? She asked. What have I done? I did not do anything. So, in your opinion, cheating on me is nothing, I said. Her face darkened. It's not what you think, she said softly. I know you just needed some, man. Terry, get away from me. I don't want to talk to you now. You don't even know what you've gotten yourself into. I just need to find a way to save you so we can get a divorce and go our separate ways. This marriage is over. Terry began to cry loudly. I just stood there and looked at her. As much as my compassion wanted to take her in my arms and comfort her, I was so angry at her for betraying me that I simply didn't want to deal with her. It reminded me of little children falling and starting to cry once they realize that no one is going to pick them up. Terry stopped crying when she noticed that Prudence and I were talking about other things. She came over to see what was going on. Jason, your friend needs to leave so we can talk about our marriage. I don't want a divorce. I love you, and I'm Catholic. We can't get a divorce, so we'll have to work it out, she said. I promise this will never happen again. And you can get a divorce, Prudence said. I will arrange it for you. The process is really simple. Well, maybe not, but in this case it will be. Step 1, he files for divorce. I'll find a Catholic judge to speed up the process. Once you have a civil divorce, you will need to go to your priest, who will go to the bishop and so on. Typically, the church will grant an annulment, which means that in the eyes of the church, the marriage never happened. I'll call the Vatican and ask them to expedite the process for you. You'll probably be free in a few weeks. That's impossible, Terry objected. Divorce and annulment should take years. This is to ensure that people do not enter into this lightly. You mean like how you cheated on me to satisfy your passion? I blurted out. I'm not going to worry about it, Terry said. We're not getting divorced. Prudence simply threw back her head and laughed. She took out her mobile phone. It looked like a regular iPhone, but was red with white trim, like her leather outfit. She dialed the number and started speaking in Italian. She asked what my last name was, just to be sure. She then spoke again, using my full name and Terry's name. She stood holding the phone for a moment, then smiled. Is your name Teresa Eunice Grant? She asked. Terry nodded. Prudence made the okay sign and continued. She then hung up and started talking to me again about our plans. What have you done? Terry asked. Wait, said Prudence. Less than 5 minutes later, the phone rang. Terry nervously picked up the phone and answered. Her eyes widened. Someone must be playing a joke on you, she said. We are not seeking an annulment. This won't happen. For a good Catholic girl like Terry to hang up on the bishop was incredible. You're a bitch, Terry screamed. You actually called the Vatican? How did you do that? Stay out of my business! Prudence didn't find Terry's anger threatening, so she turned away and ignored her just as I did. Terry turned to me and started to come at me. Jason, I don't want a divorce. Please, darling, give me one more chance. Terry, you should call Crystal and tell her that she lied to me trying to save you. She completely misrepresented how many guys you cheated on me with. Tell her she knows what it means. Tell her I won't do anything until I deal with you. But she needs to sort out her business. I returned to my conversation with Prudence. Prudence and I talked late into the night. An hour or two after midnight, she left for where she lived. She promised to return before dawn the next day. As soon as Prudence left, Terry started putting pressure on me. She whined and begged. The interesting thing I noticed was that she remembered the guys she slept with but didn't remember anything about the vampire. Prudence and I also had a plan for this. We assumed that the next night he would try to contact her or call her out or whatever he was doing. Our plan was to use Terry as bait and let her go wherever he called her. Once we're sure he doesn't get her, we'll follow him to his lair. I don't think Terry realized it, but I didn't want to be with her anymore. I wanted to save her life, but our life together was over as soon as Prudence left. I started getting ready for bed. I should have been hungry, but all the activity, stress, and emotional turmoil took its toll. All I wanted to do was lie down and sleep. I quickly took a shower and went to bed. As soon as my head hit the pillow, I passed out. I don't know how long I had been asleep when Terry came into the room. She crawled under the covers and tried to get into bed with me. My eyes flew open and I realized two things. One, if the vampire was going to use Terry, I might be dead during the night hours when he was awake. There was no way for me to fall asleep next to her. It was simply too dangerous. Second, I didn't want her to sleep with me or be anywhere near me. Terry, what are you doing? I asked. I'm going to bed, she said. Unless you want to make me a better offer. You haven't touched me for 2 weeks. Her eyes dropped as she realized why. Jason, I haven't done anything with anyone but you in over a month, she said. It's all over. I realized that I don't need to experiment. I had the best man for me in bed all this time. I never stopped loving you, darling, and I've never loved anyone else. I just wanted to know how it would be. Crystal does it, and so does Sarah. I know it sounds stupid, but it was just sex. But Jason, you've had a lot more partners than I have. I think I loved what we were doing so much that I wanted to learn more about my own sexuality. And maybe I wanted to try some things that you and I haven't done to teach you. I didn't do it to hurt you, Jason. I also violated my values for you. I needed to make sure I didn't get any disease. I also needed to make sure I didn't get pregnant. I only wanted to have your children, dear. I know I was wrong, and I hope you can forgive me. Can't we start over? I forgive you, I said. We can start over. Terry, you need to go to the guest room to sleep. For how long? She asked. Forever, I said. At least until the divorce is over and we have separate housing. But you said we could start over, she said. You said you would forgive me. Her eyes filled with tears, and she began to sob. I forgive you. I forgive because I don't have the time and energy to carry all this hatred inside me, I said. And we can start over. We are starting over from scratch. Only this time I know what you are like. So don't expect us to get back together. It's because of this woman, isn't it? She hissed. Okay, Jason, I made a mistake. And now you want to use this mistake to replace me with your tall, blonde supermodel? Terry, just stop talking until you say something really stupid, I said. Good night. She ran out of the room and I locked the door behind her. In my bedroom, I had one of my favorite swords hanging on the wall. My Paul Chen Golden Oriole Katana was probably one of the most beautiful swords I had. It wasn't decorated with gold or anything like that, but it was a well-made, functional katana that was really nice to look at. I took it off the wall and placed it on the bed next to me. I also set off the alarm in the house. If Terry or the vampire controlled her, they would try to enter the room. They would have to break down the door and then get hit. I also knew that morning was only an hour or two away. Staying so close to dawn in an unfamiliar area would be unwise. I decided that the vampire would wait until the next evening. A knock woke me up. It was persistent but gentle. I opened the bedroom door to find Terry sleeping on the floor just outside the door. I stepped over her and noticed how peacefully she slept. I picked up her sleeping body and laid her on the bed in the guest room at the end of the hallway. As I was putting her down, The knocking came again. Someone was quietly knocking on my front door. I looked at my watch and realized why I was still so tired. I had only slept for about 40 minutes. It was barely 4 o'clock in the morning. I headed to the front door, ready to give whoever was there a piece of my mind. When I opened the door abruptly, I held my breath when I saw who it was. "What happened, Prue?" I asked. I could tell from her expression that something was wrong. "I hate coming here," she said, "but I can't think of any other place to go." "Sister Prudence, you are always a welcome guest here," I said. She smiled at this, but the smile was not as bright as I expected. I then noticed that her car was parked in my driveway and it was not empty. "What happened, Prue?" I asked again. "We need help," she said. I followed her to the car. What I saw shocked me. Penance sat in the passenger seat, hunched over and in pain. Patience was behind her, leaning against a small man who seemed to be in some kind of shock. "Let's get them inside first," I said. I reached out to help Penance out of the seat, but she angrily pulled her hand back, causing her pain. Despite her bravery, she groaned. I moved the seat back and tried to pull out the little man in the back seat. His eyes seemed cloudy. He looked straight ahead, not recognizing anything. Prudence touched his shoulder and he stepped back. She spoke to him in a soothing voice and he turned to her. She gently took his hand and helped him out of the car. I saw that Patience was slumped on the seat, leaning over. I grabbed her under her back with one hand and under her knees with the other, carrying her out of the car and slamming the door with my foot. I walked towards the guest room at the back of the house, but before I could get very far, Penance blocked my path. "Where are you taking her?" she asked. "She can't stand," I said. "I was going to take her to a room to put her down, and then you or Prue could examine her and find out what's wrong with her." "Get out of the way, sister," Patience said weakly. "He's just trying to make me comfortable." Penance relented. "I won't be able to open the door when we get there or deal with the things on the bed. Can you help me?" I asked. She realized that I was just trying to calm her down by allowing her to accompany her friend. She followed me and quickly opened the door. I chose the guest room that Terry liked best, at the opposite end of the house from our room. The room was painted yellow and had large windows to let in the sunlight. I laid Patience down gently on the bed and told her that Prue would be coming to check on her. I asked if she needed anything. She said she was okay, and I walked out with Penance following me. I found Prudence trying to calm the little guy who was screaming and clearly upset. "What does he have to do with this?" I asked. "He's one of our computer technicians," she said. I grabbed the little guy and pulled him out of the room. He followed me after the first steps. I took him to my office and sat him down in front of the computer. He loaded it and then looked at me. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. He no longer seemed so nervous or upset. "That was pretty clever," said Penance. "Prue, can you give him something related to computers and the internet?" I asked. When someone is going through a traumatic experience, returning to a familiar environment like computers helps. She asked him to contact their base and report what happened. I noticed that Penance was still sparing her hand and saw the reason. Her shoulder was dislocated. Both her shoulder and Patience needed medical attention. I have a friend who works as a nurse and a medical technician at a large manufacturing plant. She had to be at the factory by 6 a.m., so I thought she was already up. I dialed her number on my iPhone and started talking to her. She hadn't gotten up yet, but she agreed to stop by. She said she would be there in an hour. I went to tell Patience about this, but she was sleeping. I told Penance that the nurse would be here in less than an hour, and she nodded at me. I offered her ice to reduce the swelling, but she decided to wait for the nurse. She kept looking at me as if she expected me to grow horns and a tail at any moment. Finally, Prudence, Penance, and I all went into the office where Myron, the computer guy, was doing something on the internet. We all sat down in comfortable chairs to talk. "After I left here, I was really worried about leaving you alone with your wife," Prudence began. "I was sure that he would try to do something through her. I expected him to try to get her to kill you. You almost killed him. In any case, when I returned to the monastery where we lived, everything was already over. It looked like someone had broken the fence. There was no one in the security booth, and I decided to yell at them for it. I guess I thought they were shirking their responsibilities. Anyway, when I went inside, all I saw were bodies. I walked all the way around the building and found Penance trying to pull Patience out the back door. After that, we found Myron, who was hiding in a storage room in the basement. It was terrible, Penance began. We returned some time ago. In fact, I started to worry about Prudence when I heard screaming from downstairs. I grabbed my 2 hand clubs because someone... She stopped and looked at me. Someone broke the shaft of my police mace. I restored the head of a mace. It is over 300 years old and was used by a famous Polish saint. Sister, we are not very interested in the history of your mace, Prudence said softly. When I looked down the stairs, I noticed that the entire lower level was full of these zombies, Penance said. I realized that the vampire followed us home. He's far smarter than anyone we've ever encountered. Most vampires are like animals. I never heard them speak. After all, they are dead. Their brains don't work anymore. Apart from being at least twice as strong as a human, having some primitive psychic abilities and those long teeth, they are less than human. I killed a few of them myself. But this guy is scary. With zombies taking over the first floor, the vampire walked up the stairs. Patience tried to stop him. We thought it was an accident when we noticed that he apparently got armor from somewhere. It's incredible for one of these creatures to realize that he can protect himself by wearing armor. I tried to stop him. I knew we were both out of the fight. I chose this office because it had one of the old lifts they used for laundry. I dragged us there and went down the shaft, holding Patience with my wounded hand. It hurt like hell. I could hear people screaming and dying from the shaft as we made our way out. Then everything became quiet. I hid us under piles of clothes in the laundry room. I heard footsteps stomping around the house and remained motionless and silent. They disappeared and I was left there. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I was scared. Several times while we were waiting there, things would get very quiet and then the noise would start again. Sometimes he was right outside the laundry room door, and I expected to be fighting for our lives at any moment. Then it became quiet for a while, but I was still afraid to move. Finally, I heard footsteps moving around the building again. I thought it was just one person. I was sure that he sent the zombies and came back to look for us or listen in silence. He really wanted to kill Patience. As the footsteps came close to our hiding place, I heard Prudence calling us, and I screamed to her. Prudence helped me with Patience, and we got out of the building. Prudence put us in her car and then went back into the building to see if there was anyone else who needed help. She told me that if anyone shows up, I need to get out of there. I was so scared that he was still there and would find her or us. She returned a few moments later with Myron, and we left from there. Why did it take you so long to come here? I asked. I didn't know where Prudence was taking us, said Penance. I was just glad we got out of there. None of us are local. Our base is in Boston. It seemed like Prudence was lost for a while because we seemed to be driving in circles. Her car doesn't have enough range before it needs to charge. Luckily, she charged it while she was in the monastery. Then we just came here. I circled because I had to make sure he wasn't following us, Prudence said. After that, I drove around, waiting for the first signs of the sun in the sky. One thing they got right in the movies is that they can't stand sunlight. Prudence looked at me, and as usual, when we looked at each other, it seemed that something was being transmitted between us. I didn't want to risk bringing him here, she said. This is exactly the place you should have come to, Prue, I said, even if that bastard was right behind you. Penance looked at us and tilted her head slightly. She raised one eyebrow and took a breath to say something when Myron happily entered the room. I made the connection, he said happily. We were ordered to return to Boston. All we have to do is get to the airport. We must contact the local bishop to arrange transportation. This nightmare is over. Blessed Lord, the patient should not be moved until she has been examined by a medical professional who can determine how serious her back injury is, I said. And you, Penance, we must immobilize your arm so as not to cause more damage to it. I don't need help from a man, she spat. And for your information, I don't like the way you... I think everyone was on edge because as soon as Penance spoke, the doorbell rang and it scared everyone. I looked out the peephole and saw my nurse friend, Janice. Janice came in and I introduced her to everyone. She examined Patience first. She said Patience needed x-rays and an MRI, judging by the fact that in addition to the pain, she had significant weakness in her legs. Janice suspected that one of her spinal discs was pressing on a nerve and preventing it from working properly. This could require surgery and implanting. It could cause more harm. She offered to take Patience to the hospital by ambulance. She then examined Penance's shoulder, and I helped her put it back in place. Penance screamed so loudly that she was probably heard in Boston, but she was very relieved when the pain ended. Janice put a bandage on her and told her not to use her arm until she could move it without pain. She said it would likely take several weeks. The four of us stood around Patience, and we explained to her what was happening. Janice gave her a strong painkiller, and we waited to hear from the bishop. Myron called him and gave Janice his instructions. Prudence and Penance were having a very animated argument about something. When the argument was over, Penance came up to me. "You're not so bad for a man," she said. "Thanks for your help in the alley with the vampire, and thank you for letting us take refuge here." I realized it was hard for her to say this. I simply nodded as she walked away, grumbling angrily. She turned to me at the last moment. "Just so you know, I could beat you," she said. I laughed as she walked away and sat next to Patience to wait for the ambulance. Prudence came and sat next to me. "Jason, I may know how to solve your problem," she said. "Which problem?" I asked. "I talked to several senior priests, and they know a ritual that can free your wife from the vampire's control," she said. "That's great," I blurted out. "Yes," she said sadly. "You could get her back and try to save your marriage." "It can't be saved," I said. "I just want her back so I can legally get her out of my life. I need a new start. I just need to finish all the old stuff before I do that." Just as I noticed the smile on Prudence's face growing wider, I felt her hand grab mine between us. From across the room came the second loudest scream I had heard that day. "What are you trying to do to her?" Penance shouted. "Leave them alone," said Patience. "No, Patience," cried Penance. Her Irish accent thickened with her anger. "Don't you see this? He holds her hand and he calls her Prue and has been looking at her with loving eyes since we arrived. I've known her for 6 years and I can only call her Prudence or sister, but he already calls her Prue and she loves it. What were they doing before we arrived? I'm telling you, this is wrong." "The bad thing is that we'll have to take her to Boston with us," Prudence said, as if Penance hadn't spoken at all. I nodded and told her to do whatever it took to save Terry. Then the ambulance arrived, and I went downstairs to let them in. The bishop I met once, when Terry and I were first married, was with them. He said a prayer over Terry's sleeping body, and then the EMTs, who were clearly working for the church, gave Terry an injection to keep her asleep during the trip to Boston. As they were carrying Terry out to the ambulance, Prudence stopped me in the hallway. "Jason, what did you mean when you said I had to come here, even if the vampire was right behind me?" she asked. "I already told you. You are always a welcome guest here," I said. I could see Penance trying to eavesdrop on us, and she was seething with anger. "Jason, no lies between us," Prudence said. "Prue, if you were in trouble or fighting for your life, no matter what, I would need to be there and fight with you," I said. "Jason, she began, but before she could say another word, Penance grabbed her arm and pulled her away from me. "Goodbye, Jason," Prudence said, as Penance put her in the car. I stood in the doorway, waiting and watching the cars drive away. I tried to sleep, but I couldn't get her out of my head. I told myself all the logical things. I tried to convince myself that she was a nun. Nothing I told myself worked. I tossed and turned in bed, wondering what would happen and if everything would be okay. As I began to think about the secret process that would free Terry from the vampire's control, the phone rang. I looked back and noticed that it was starting to get dark again. I stumbled and picked up the phone. It was the bishop. "Hello, sir," I said. "Are you calling to let me know that Terry is okay?" "Actually, I'm just putting you in touch with someone else," he said. There was some stirring, and then another voice spoke on the phone. "Hello, man," she said. "Let me talk to Sister Prudence." "Prue is not here? Penance?" I said angrily. "Yes, it's Penance. She took your wife and all her weapons and—" "Damn," I said. "She followed him. We thought that as soon as it got dark, the vampire would try to summon Terry again. Why didn't she take me with her?" While I was talking, I was getting dressed. I could hear Penance moving in the background as well. "Penance, I'm going after her. I'll call you when I find her," I said. "No, I'll go with you," she said. "Pick me up from the church your wife goes to." I wasn't in the mood to argue, so I didn't. The church was on the way. I thought the vampire would return to the place where we saw him the first time. If I'm wrong, Prue will die and I won't be able to live with it. I drove up to the church. My Mustang was breathing fire and letting everyone in the area know that we were here. "We can't drive this car. It's too noisy," said Penance. "We'll go in Prudence's car." Clearly, the Almighty was looking out for us that evening and did something to me. I got into that car, a Chevrolet at that, and didn't complain. I knew I would need several showers after that to wash away the Chevy smell, but all I cared about was getting to Prue before she got hurt. I had to admit that Penance was right. Prue's car was much quieter, which might have been useful in this case. Repentance and I were reluctant allies. We held on to each other to save the person we both cared about. After a few awkward pauses, we both started talking at the same time. "What did you do with Sister Prudence?" she asked. "If you do this all the time, why aren't you better prepared?" I asked. "We rarely encounter something so powerful," she spat. "I didn't do anything to her," I said. "You know she followed that creature to protect you, don't you?" she said. "What are you talking about, crazy woman?" I asked. "Think about it," she spat. "We'll leave here in a few hours. We just had to wait for the private plane that was sent to pick us up." But she began to think the two people who did the most damage to this beast were Patience with her crossbow bolt, and you. This creature was angry and wanted revenge. Or maybe it was just defending itself out of instinct. With Patience out of the zone, it will follow you, fool. For some reason, Sister Prudence found this unacceptable. She got this strange look on her face just before sunset when she left. Your wife, even with a bunch of illegal substances in her system, sat down and tried to get out. The car moved through the evening city almost silently. The only sound it made was the tires rolling on the ground. For a guy who loved the sound of 8 pistons in a synchronized mechanical symphony, this was scary. I told myself 2 things over and over again. I alternated them in my head. God wants you to drive this thing. You're doing this for Prudence. "Do you love your wife, man?" she suddenly asked. "No," I said honestly. "I really loved her once, but she betrayed me. All this is gone." "Patience thinks you love Prudence now," she spat. "She also thinks Prudence loves you. You know this won't work, don't you? She will lose all her powers and become an ordinary nun if you desecrate her. You should also know that Sister Prudence lied to you. She told you there is a process to save your wife. There is not. She just used her as bait to save you. Why did you stop?" "We arrived," I said. "Maybe you should stay in the car. You can't help much with one hand." She didn't bother to answer. She just rolled her eyes as if I was crazy. I turned behind the bar into the alley where we fought last night. The entire electric car was silent, but it didn't matter. We were too late. I jumped out of the car, followed by Repentance, holding a mace in one hand. I brought my golden Oriole katana. I thought that if I was destined to die, it would be better to hold my favorite sword in my hands. It was funny, but this time, with Prue in danger, I didn't care about my moral principles. I would kill every zombie that the vampire could hypnotize to save Prue. I grew up reading stories about samurai who did incredible things with their swords. They supposedly could cut anything. There were stories of them cutting gun barrels with their sharpened blades. I needed to do something like this. I was sure that the Lord was on my side. I gathered all my strength like the samurai of old. I knew I would only have one chance at this. I knew I only had a few seconds to act, and suddenly it became clear what I had to do. I killed him. The homeless people in the alley who had come in response to the creature's silent call looked around them as if they did not understand why they were there. They walked down the alley, asking each other for change. Terry looked up as if she, too, had finally woken up. She looked around in confusion. Repentance and I knelt next to Prue. I wanted to kiss her so badly, but I knew that Repentance would kill me if I did. I was so excited that I wobbled and swayed, trying to stay on my feet. Prudence opened her beautiful eyes and looked at us. "I couldn't stop him," she muttered. "He's too strong. I had a plan, but it didn't work. I tried to save Jason." "I know, honey," I said. "You thought you could break through that chest plate he wore and pierce his heart with your sword. You got the idea from Patience scaring him when she hit him with a crossbow bolt." "Where is he? Where is he?" she asked. "Probably in the 3rd circle of hell," I said. "He's no longer a threat." "Did you kill him?" she asked. "It wasn't me," said Repentance, "but I helped. He killed him. But I really could have done it if I knew it was possible to cheat. And you know you'll be angry. He broke all your things. He ruined your car and broke your sword." Prudence tried to stand up and looked at Repentance with a shocked expression on her face. Sister Repentance, did you say evil? She asked. Good nuns, especially the Sisters of Fate, do not use such language. We walked out of the alley and Terry followed us. Prudence leaned on me and held my hand. Repentance looked at us angrily the whole time. We returned to the church and told Patience and the bishop what had happened. Everyone was glad that the nightmare was over with the death of the vampire. Everything except my marriage could return to normal. Everyone seemed unaware of the looks Prudence and I exchanged. They also seemed to accept that we often touched and held hands. We were together all night since they weren't leaving until the next morning. Prudence and Repentance took me home, not wanting to leave us alone for a second. My heart broke when Prudence said goodbye. Jason, I've never felt this way about anyone, she said. I wish I didn't have to leave. Just do it, said Repentance. The plane is waiting. We're going home. I turned away, but she stopped me. Jason, she said, and before I could react, she kissed me. Now I know what love is, she said, then turned and left. Wait, I called. I ran back into the house and returned with a sword. I handed it to her. What is this for? She asked. So you remember me, I said. It's not a 300-year-old church-sanctioned katana, but it won't break like yours did. Think of me when you use it. And for your information, I also know what love is. 3 days later, I sat down with Terry to discuss our divorce. She tried the old, I'm Catholic, I can't get a divorce trick. I showed her the annulment papers from the church, contingent on our civil divorce. She tore them up and put them in her purse. I told her they were just copies and that I had many more. She refused to see a lawyer. I tried to serve her with a summons several times, but she was always elusive. This didn't bother me. I moved on with my life. I removed her name from all my accounts and canceled our joint credit cards. Her name was never on the mortgage, so I changed all the locks. I took her belongings to her parents' house. I wasn't upset about not getting a divorce. At that time, I had no intention of ever getting married again. How could I? I was in love with a nun. Watching kids in costumes on Halloween made me wonder how many of those ghosts and goblins were real. Hell, they probably all existed. 3 days ago, I didn't believe in vampires. Are you saying you want to divorce my daughter because she was attacked by a vampire? Terry's father asked. It doesn't seem fair. He didn't seem to believe me. No, sir, I said. I know what happened with the vampire wasn't her fault. These creatures can easily control people with weak minds or those who can't resist temptation. I want to divorce Terry because she cheated on me with 4 different guys before the vampire incident. Jason, she went through a year of therapy. She's a completely different woman now. Could you give her another chance? Besides, your nun friend is back to hunting monsters. You shouldn't be alone. And I don't think anyone loves you as much as Terry does. I just smiled. The Lord works in mysterious ways, I said. I've been busy over the past year. The first few weeks on my own were really interesting. Once I accepted that Terry was hiding and wouldn't give me a divorce, I decided to tie up some loose ends. I sent a copy of that video and photos to the wife of Nick Jones, the guy Crystal cheated with. She was so angry that she divorced him and took all his money. She included Crystal in the divorce suit, so naturally Ed found out and divorced Crystal as well. I thought you gave your word to Crystal, he began. I did, I said. I promised Crystal I wouldn't tell Ed. I never said someone else couldn't tell him. I considered it poetic justice. Crystal helped destroy my marriage, so it was only fair that hers should fail too. I was sitting at my dining room table, polishing my new golden Oriole katana that I bought online to replace the one I gave to Prudence when someone knocked on my door. I opened it, and there she was. She was wearing a white blouse and a dark skirt, the kind nuns wear when they're out of their habit. Sister Prudence, I said, smiling. Now it's just Prudence, she said. I was freed from the Sisters of Fate. But why? I asked in shock. The Sisters of Destiny are raised from a very young age to serve the church, she said. They must remain pure and untouchable and have special gifts of speed and strength because of this. I lost my powers because I was defiled. But we never did anything except one innocent kiss, I said. Jason, that kiss wasn't all that innocent to me, she said. Besides, it wasn't just because of that. When I returned, they noticed a scratch on my neck from the vampire. It was probably the touch of evil that caused me to lose my powers because I was corrupted. It was decided that I could no longer serve. They tried to place me in 3 different monasteries to serve as an ordinary nun. I didn't stay long in any of them. Once they found out what I did in my previous role, most of them were afraid of me, she said, lowering her head. That must be hard, I said. The people you served most of your life have turned their backs on you. It must be truly terrible to be betrayed by those you love. We have something in common. You were betrayed by the church, and I was betrayed by my unfaithful wife. She nodded and smiled brightly. Wait a minute, I said. Repentance and I checked on you right after I killed the vampire. You didn't have any scratches or bites, and it wouldn't have mattered if you had. When we killed the vampire, his curse disappeared. I know, she smiled. I made the scratch myself in the bathroom with a pin. I told you I was torn, but now I have no place to go. I remember someone telling me that I was always welcome. I need someone to teach me the wicked ways of this worldly life. Wait a minute, Terry said. You mean this woman left the church and now she lives in my house with you? I nodded. Forget you, Jason. I still won't give you a divorce so you can marry someone else. I came here today to see if you had come to your senses so that we could be together again. Come on, Dad. Let's get out of here. Terry, we are already divorced. I filed for divorce due to abandonment 6 months ago. Tomorrow on Halloween it will be final. You've been away for a whole year. Forget you, Jason, she said angrily. Then she looked strangely at something behind me. Fingers began to lightly massage my shoulders. I realized it must be an almost 6-foot-tall goddess with golden hair. It's my job, Terry, Prudence said. What? Terry said, stepping back as her father shook his head at the sight of Prudence. Having sex with Jason is my job now. When Terry and her father left the dining room, Prudence sat down at the table. Jason, I heard the part about your divorce being finalized, she said. This is good. Oh, Patience and Repentance will come to visit tomorrow. It's been a year and I think they want to test me. They'll bring their new partner, Piety. What does this have to do with my divorce? I asked. Nothing, dear, she said. But the divorce is good because I found out today that all those naughty things you made me do seem to have worked. We'll have to get married. Prue, I began, and she nodded. We are expecting a child. I think it will be a girl. Repentance will kill me. I laughed. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like.